Today I want to talk to you guys about the bombing of a children's hospital in Kiev. This children's hospital was treating cancer patients, and it's gotten a lot of attention, and I want to make sure that we discuss this in a responsible manner because there's a lot of misinformation being spread about this, and I just want to say right off the bat that if you're here looking for me to respect the people who are coming out and saying that it was actually the Ukrainians bombing themselves, or take them seriously, or take their claims seriously, this is not the stream for you, because to be completely honest, I despise these people, and I believe from the evidence that is publicly gathered as of right now, that if you think that the Russians, what they're saying about the Ukrainians bombing themselves with air defense and hitting that hospital is true, you are one of two things. You are either too stupid and you have been convinced by somebody you trust, either a speaker or a friend, that it was the Ukrainians because you've been misinterpreting some defense articles, or you've been, oh, I'm looking at this weapon system, it looks similar, and my favorite Twitter account said, and therefore the Russians own your mind. You might not know it. You might be, this might be completely outside of your conscious decision making, but the Russians own your mind, or the Russians own your soul, as in they pay you. And this is what I think for a lot of the propagandists that are out there, is that they pay you either in exposure, fame, attention, or more often than not, money, because they do also throw money around. A big way how Russia today gets propagandists is by offering above average rates for journalists. And so if you're a journalist trying to get started and you're not really succeeding as to make it big on CNN or MSNBC, all the jobs you're going to get are not going to be extremely high paying. In fact, a lot of them might be paychecks that are going to be making it kind of hard to get by. And so what the Russians will do is they'll offer those journalists who couldn't make it at the bigger institutions, for sometimes valid and a lot of times not valid reasons because of the constrictions placed by mainstream news publications, or channel TV news, stuff like that. They'll offer them RT spots. And not only will they offer them being on television or the resources that RT has, they'll also offer them larger paychecks. Anyway, so we're not going to be treating this seriously. That doesn't mean we're not going to be debunking it and we're not going to talk about it. It's just we don't respect those people because I don't believe they're honest actors. I believe that somebody can maybe have been tricked by them and still be an honest actor, but I don't believe that the people that are pushing these are honest actors, so I will not treat the pushers of this information as honest actors. So, what happened? Yesterday, it was early morning, and I was woken up by the sound of an engine. And these cruise missiles, and a lot of these missiles, it's very hard to distinct them from a low-flying jet. And in the Kiev area, sometimes you'll hear like engine sounds, and be like, oh, that's a jet. But it was distinct enough for me to know, because I've heard the jets flying around in the area before, that it was not a jet, that it was something else. And then it whizzed over my apartment. And when I say it whizzed over my apartment, I mean it whizzed very close to our apartment. And I then heard the explosions and knew that there was an attack going on. So I waited, I was listening, trying to measure if it was going to hit my apartment, if it was going to hit anywhere close. I crouched down, getting ready to hit the floor very quickly, heard multiple explosions, and then checked social media and checked all the sources for what was going on. After the first few impacts, then the sirens started up. The sirens started up after, which was, of course, a problem. Once I've done the research, it was clear to me that the Russians had did a large strike on not only Kiev, but they would later do strikes on other cities like Dnipro as well, hitting a bunch of different locations, including 2 medical institutions. That's right. The one in Kiev is just the one that's getting the majority of the attention. They actually hit a second medical institution in Dnipro. Now, there is a distinction I need to make about that strike, where that strike seems to have actually been an interception leading to shrapnel hitting the medical institution. That's not the only strike that happened in Dnipro. That's not the only strike that happened elsewhere. But I do want to make that distinction. Whereas the strike in Kiev, the strike on the children's hospital with the cancer ward seemed to be direct. It was direct, it was not intercepted, and it hit target. And it was devastating. We have some footage here, I guess I could show you guys, of the destruction here after it hit the children's hospital. Yesterday, the last update I saw was over 20 something dead. This morning, that number has risen to over 30 dead across the country, including 4 children, civilians killed not only in Kiev, but in Dnipro and other locations as well, including the father of one of the children's patients. There were children at this facility also hurt. I think over 116 casualties total. If you were to look at all of the casualties, that doesn't mean just those killed, but those who have lost legs, lost limbs, got injured. This is old data. It says killed at least 20 people, but this is old data. And here you can see the people who almost immediately sprung into action and started digging through the rubble once it was realized what had been struck, which was a children's hospital. So this strike happens, kills a bunch of civilians, injures many others. It's absolutely devastating. The children who were going through radiological treatment, who were trying to be treated for cancer, were quickly, the ones that were not hurt, shuffled out of the hospital, and they gathered outside with their IV bags dripping out of their arms. Others huddled underground, scared of a second strike hitting the location, therefore killing more children, killing more civilians. It was all around just a horrific instance of brutality from the Russians. Now, I want to show you guys, just to be clear, that they did strike the building. GeoConfirmed has already done some work on this, on tracking the location, showing that they certainly struck the building. I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty of like, here's the coordinates and stuff like that. The evidence is pretty overwhelming, so it was clear that this hospital was struck. And here you can see the video, which we will re-examine in a moment when talking about who struck it, because there seems to be, from Russian state media and from a lot of their lackeys, some division about who struck it. But here is one of the videos of the cruise missiles that were striking Kiev. Quite a large explosion. Quite a large explosion. Now, for those of you who are surprised by this, I do want to say that you shouldn't be. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that it's even your fault. The media has not done a fantastic job. And when I say the media, I don't want to say generally the media broadly, but a lot of the media has not been doing a great job in informing people of the record of the Russian army when it comes to bombing medical institutions. The Russian army has a long history of bombing medical institutions. There's just one article from New Lines magazine that talks about the over 600 bombings and targetings of healthcare facilities, hospitals, other facilities all across Syria, the vast majority of which was done by the Assad regime and the Russian army. There's also a report, and if you don't want to go through all this data and you just want like some clear-cut reporting, here is 12 hours, 4 strikes. The New York Times did a great report, I believe 5 years ago, on the Russians bombing 4 healthcare facilities in a 12-hour time period, complete with radio transmissions, reports of aircraft in the area, and even video from local journalists of them doing precision strikes on hospitals. Let's show a little bit of this footage before moving on, because this got very little attention, and if I can highlight this for at least a moment, I will.
This is Russian radio traffic to an Air Force pilot on a bombing mission over Syria. 35-36-36-28.06. But these coordinates aren't for a military target. They point to this underground hospital. Moments later, the pilot bombs it. Nabad al-Hayat is one of more than 50 healthcare facilities bombed in Syria since April. As President Bashar al-Assad seeks to retake the last pocket of opposition with a ferocious onslaught of air power. Observers have long suspected that Russia bombs hospitals, but no one has been able to prove it, until now. The Times has assembled a large body of evidence from multiple sources that directly implicates Russia in 4 hospital attacks in just 12 hours. One day that's a microcosm of how healthcare has been crippled in parts of Syria. We collected 4 main types of evidence. First, flight logs. For years, a network of plane spotters has tracked Air Force activity over Syria to warn civilians of incoming attacks. They record sightings of fighter jets and listen in on open radio communications between pilots and air traffic control.
Okay, they go into the processes of how they got this all this information. It's pretty extensive. It's pretty undisputable. If you guys want to go check out how they gathered the evidence, you can. It's all public information. You can go read the article yourself. I will also say, though, that UN healthcare information was given to the Russians, where they gave them this precise coordinates of different hospitals, under the assumption that these coordinates would allow them to have more transparency about the battlefield, meaning they could more clearly avoid bombing hospitals. And then those hospitals that were on the list given to Russia to clearly delineate these are hospitals, so they had no way of denying that they knew, those hospitals were then immediately bombed, the different coordinates that they were given. So this is a pattern of behavior that, while it was terrifying to hear those explosions and hear the missiles, number one, I've heard and experienced that before, but number two, like, the world has heard and experienced this before. So when I say it shouldn't be that surprising that the Russians did this with using a cruise missile, that it was a KH-101, which is pretty accurate. It doesn't have an extremely large area of effect when it makes impact. It's not like a grad multiple rocket launcher or some extremely inaccurate, like, oh, they're taking like an air defense system or sea missile and they're retrofitting. No, it's supposed to be a low flying cruise missile that flies low enough that it's hard to be picked up by radars, and then goes down during the terminal stage, hits the target with a small radius, I forget if it was 7 meters that was the radius, but large enough that you can hit a building. Right? It doesn't mean that they never miss, but that these are one of the more accurate cruise missile systems that the Russians have to do long-range strikes. Now, moving on. There has been some dispute about who did this strike. So quickly, I will show you once again the moment of impact, and then I will show you the arguments of the interlocutors either paid off by the Russians or mentally owned by the Russians, okay? And then we'll talk about that evidence and how what they're saying shows they should never be taken seriously on any foreign policy conflict ever again, especially wars where people and children are dying and being targeted. Okay, so there's the video. Let's see other people's conclusions. Mr. Tinkle. Ukraine blew up their own children's hospital in Kiev this morning with an American air defense missile. Stop sending these terrorist bombs. And then posted these photos, which was from My Lord Bebo, which was his source, which we're going to get to in a moment. He then later posted these pictures to prove it, which was, there is a screenshot of the missile, the cruise missile, before it made impact. That was it in terminal flight before it makes impact, in comparison to a Russian cruise missile from a below shot at a totally different angle. Can I first say, showing these two shots, one at this angle, one at a totally different angle, at a point where you can't even like compare it similar, like, this is already dishonest, right? You're comparing the missiles on different backdrops with different coloration. Like, I can't see any of the details on the cruise missile on the right. I can see at least some of them on the left. Like, you can see the fin on top. You can see the engine on the bottom. We're gonna get into that in a second, but not a good comparison, but whatever. Then he shows a different missile, which is the NASAM being compared to the missile that struck today, the cruise missile. Now, the missile on the right here is from Ukrainian air defense. I believe it's referred to as a NASAM air defense system. How this works is these are fired by like a Patriot. They go up, and before a target, a bomb hits your city, it would blow up right before making impact, throwing a bunch of shrapnel to destroy it in the air. That's how interceptors work. And it's not necessarily by having the little tip of the missile hits it and then blows up. It's right before impact, it blows up to have a wider area effect, therefore giving it more of a chance to actually knock the missile out of the sky. Okay, we're not done stacking the evidence though. Let's stack more evidence against me. Let's go to Jackson Hinkle's source. Let's listen to the people that Jackson Hinkle respect on this type of stuff, that the Russian propagandists respect on this type of stuff, when they're not Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor and those clowns. My last statement for now. The tail kind of looks like a KH-101. The wings are clearly not a KH-101. So essentially, it's hard to say what it is with 100% certainty. The damage done to the ground looks like a small warhead to me. Maybe the missile is something of exotic or damaged. And then continuing to his better point, which was glorious. The wings do not match, hence it is not a KH-101. No matter how you tilt it, the wings are not proportioned like on the video. Just check the length of the red lines. Also, since you can see both wings on the video, the missile has to be tilted or you wouldn't see the second wing. A small kitchen experiment shows the proportion of the wings to be the body if you tilt the missile. P.S. I'm moving on to other topics until new evidence emerges, but I want to emphasize it's a tragedy. I wish it didn't happen, no matter what missile it was. This dude, and then he adds it. He shows the missile, and then he gets a clip and some popsicle sticks, and he puts the popsicle sticks in the clip. And then he just tilts it. He just tilts it around. It's like, wow, guys. That missile doesn't look like my popsicle sticks. I don't know, guys. It didn't pass the pops. I'm sorry. Just the contrast of the popsicle sticks next to the cruise missile. Like, hey guys, my popsicle sticks don't look like a cruise. Hey, maybe it's because they're popsicle sticks and not a cruise missile. Maybe if you made a little model of the cruise missile, it'd be easier than this crooked popsicle stick contraption. This contraption. By the way, it's not even at the proper angle that the missile was falling down at. It's not even at the proper angle. But obviously, I am silly to question popsicle stick science. This is the cutting edge of scientific development. We've got like nanomachines, AI, and third grade arts and crafts. Okay, these are the three fastest developing industries in the United States. Okay, so first things first, for the idea that it was the NASAMS, or as Lord Bebo said, oh, the impact was not big enough. Look at this impact. Look at this zone. This is a large impact. This is a very large impact. I've been to a lot of craters made by artillery shells, made by Lancets, made by cruise missiles, S-300s, made by all sorts of bombs and missiles. An interceptor, the interceptor that they're talking about doing this damage is 40 bombs. I mean, not 40 bombs, 40 pounds, roughly. This was not a 40-pound bomb. If you think this was a 40-pound bomb, then you have no perspective on how much damage is done by a big bomb, a small bomb, or how much pounds, how much TNT, how much explosive you need to make this big of an impact crater. You want to know how much explosive is stuffed into a KH-101? Like well over 1,000 pounds. Now that sounds like something that could actually do this amount of damage. We all saw that explosion. Does that look like a 40-pound explosive to you? A 40-pound explosive? For reference, Like the artillery shells that are making impact on the front line are like around, if we're talking like the 155 millimeter, we're talking about like roughly 100 pounds. And this looks like a much bigger impact than one shell, doesn't it? And you're telling me that the 40-pound bomb did this? No. So the first thing they're betting on is that you just don't know, number one, how American interceptors work, because if it was to make impact, if it fell back on its design properties, it should not even explode, or it should turn itself off, or it shouldn't even activate, because again, it's made to intercept and it's programmed in a way where it shouldn't be doing that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But even if it did, this is not 40 pounds worth of explosive. This is not just shrapnel from boom and it's throwing the shrapnel everywhere. You might be able to like mess up the side of a building. This is not 40-pound worth of explosive. So that's the first thing. The weapon that they're saying that did this could not have physically done this. This is the first thing. Now let's throw away the popsicle science for a second and do some good old-fashioned OSAT. Here are 4, and a lot of this was done by Bellingcat. And I'm using Bellingcat, number one, because like their sources were the most clean cut, even though like this is all publicly available data. You can go see this yourself. They made these comparisons. And number two, because it angers all of the correct people. But as you can see here, these are 4 separate frames of the cruise missile traveling to location, where you can clearly see something on the bottom of the cruise missile on the back, a little fin on the back, on top as well. And you can see as it comes into the terminal zone, you can see its wings. It has 2 wings, not 4 wings like the NASM that they were showing, 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom, 1 this way, 1 that way, 4 fins pointing in each direction. I don't see no fin pointing up down the body of the missile, and I don't see no fin pointing down. I see 2 fins going out, the 2 wings. I see a fin pointing up, and I see what looks like, it's kind of hard to make it from this distance, but something on the very back of it, on the bottom. That's a very distinct design feature, isn't it? Isn't it a distinct design feature? Look at this. That thing on the back there, that seems to be pushing the cruise missile, that's a very distinct design feature. I wonder if we could make it out on any type of weapon. Oh, I know. The KH-101. That exact design feature right there. It has 1 wing on one side, 1 wing on the other side. It has the fin pointing up that we would see on the back, and it has that exact design feature. Not only that, but the Russian army has regularly used them in Ukraine to bomb, wouldn't you know it, Kiev. The very city that was bombed today. And if you want to get comparisons to put it up side by side, here is a 3D model of a KH-101 on the left, and there is a blurry shot, because you have to zoom in for this shot, of the cruise missile in terminal velocity before it makes impact. So it looks 1-to-1. It looks like a KH-101. It functioned like a KH-101. It had the explosive power of a KH-101. When you fade them over each other, it just makes its features that look like a KH-101 look only more like a KH-101. Now, he, though, then took this 3D model from Bellingcat and compared it, thinking that this actually disproved that it was a KH-101. So he looked at this evidence, and this was the critics, the people who disagree with, I think, the obvious consensus. This was his response to it. My quote-unquote experiment has below and above, but you seem to just cling on to details and ignore anything else. Here, a 3D model at scale. Stuff doesn't match, but you can just say, carry on with your scientific argument, Russia bad, therefore everything is Russia's fault. Don't waste my time anymore and move along. Post your predictable takes. Did he think that this made his case better? Look at it. Look, it's the same. You can't just put the 3D model that very clearly looks like the cruise missile that it is next to, and then say, "Oh no, that doesn't look like it." It very clearly looks like it in all design features. The NASM does not have that thing on the back. The NASM doesn't. It doesn't have it. It doesn't need it, because it's not meant to travel that far. It's just meant to go into the sky and blow up. It didn't make the impact. It can't make the impact crater that these bombs made. Not to mention of how it was designed, and it wouldn't make sense. Like, it should have a fallback. It would stop. Nothing makes sense here. These are people that were either paid by Russia or owned by Russia mentally. That is the only explanation. The evidence is so overwhelming. And that was before even more video evidence came out showing it acting like a cruise missile, not interceptors gone awry.
Ебать, это 4-я нахуй! 5-я, блядь! Тупо в завод Артема! Ебать, 6-ю слышу! Охуеть! Пизда нахуй!
To me, the evidence is unambiguous. The Russians bombed Kiev. The Russians bombed the hospital. The UN says that's what the evidence points to. The Ukrainians have physical evidence of the ground of a KH-101, the shrapnel. That's what the video footage points to. That's what the photographs, the freeze frames point to. The 3D models match. That's what the impact crater points to. Certainly not an interceptor when it comes to payload size. This is a last-ditch, desperate effort before the NATO summit for the Russians to try to quickly change the narrative around this, say, oh, wait, no, don't look at that, before the Ukrainians get to talk to everybody about this horrific thing that they did, that they have a record of doing, not only in Ukraine, because they've bombed hospitals in Ukraine before, but also in other countries as well. They've done again and again and again and again. And when we're supposed to believe now, the Russians have gotten a new wave of reflection.
Every day can be a fundraiser for Dylan.
Hey, thank you for the $5. I appreciate it. A new wave of moral reflection making them stop. No, I don't buy it. It's again, let me just hit through the evidence again. The impact crater points towards it. The shrapnel on the ground points towards it. The video evidence, the photo evidence, the Russian record, not only in Ukraine, but another country. Them using this exact weapon model in Ukraine before. We've got everything outside of God himself coming down and saying you did it and pointing towards Vladimir Putin. Again, if anyone is telling you that the evidence points towards the Russians being right about this and it was the Ukrainians, ask who's paying them or ask who convinced them, who got their mind on that, because the evidence is overwhelming. And this shows the people, really cuts them out of the fold, who do not care about the truth, do not care about the people suffering on the ground. They only care about defending their political side or their geopolitical bloc. They sold their soul a long time ago, and you don't need to go sell your soul with them. Here's some of the impact on civilians, because I don't want to make this about just a bunch of morons on the internet. In a store, as Kiev's getting bombed, taking cover. The Ukrainians later, of course, responded by hitting Russia with a lot of drones last night. They hit Russia, including multiple, I believe it was electrical substations and other locations with unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. No hospitals were hit, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, this is a repetition of Russian behavior that they've done before. The evidence here is overwhelming. The Russians will still deny it, because if they were to admit to it, that would just make too clear to the world exactly how immoral their tactics of war are. Whether this was the deliberate targeting or not, I cannot say, because I'm just not reading the minds of the Russians. But what I will say is this: they don't want to take responsibility the cruise missile they used is incredibly accurate, and it was not intercepted. So it's certainly enough to make you question whether this was an accident or was the Russians trying to punish the Ukrainians and break their will to fight as the war drags on much longer than Putin ever anticipated. I hope I gave sufficient evidences and went through enough of the proofs.